Then leave the poor plebeian his single tighter life, the sweet, sweet love of daughter, of sister, and of wife, the gentle speech, the balm for all that his vexed soul endures, the kiss in which he half forgets even such a yoke as yours. Still let the maiden's beauty swell the father's breast with pride. Still let the bridegroom's arms enfold an unpolluted bride. Bear as the inexpiable wrong, the unutterable shame that turns the coward's heart to steel, the sluggard's blood to flame, lest when our latest hope is fled, ye taste of our despair, and learn by proof in some wild hour how much the wretched dare. Straightway Virginius led the maid a little space aside, to where the reeking shambles stood, piled up with horn and hide, close to yon low dark archway, where in a crimson flood leaps down to the great sewer the gurgling stream of blood. Hard by, a flesher on a block had laid his whittle down. Virginius caught the whittle up and hid it in his gown, and then his eyes grew very dim and his throat began to swell, and in a hoarse, changed voice he spake, "Farewell, sweet child, farewell. Oh, how I loved my darling, though stern I sometimes be. To thee thou know'st it was not so. Who could be so to thee? And how my darling moved me. How glad she was to hear my footstep on the threshold when I came back last year, and how she danced with pleasure to see my sweet crown, and took my sword and hung it up and brought me forth my gown. Now all those things are over. Yes, all thy pretty ways, thy needlework, thy prattle, thy snatches of old lays, and none will grieve when I go forth, nor smile when I return, or watch beside the old man's bed, or weep upon his urn. The house that was the happiest within the Roman walls, the house that envied not the wealth of Capua's marble halls, now for the brightness of thy smile must have eternal gloom, and for the music of thy voice the silence of the tomb. The time is come. See how he points his eager hand this way. See how his eyes gloat on thy grief like a kite's upon the prey. With all his wit he little deems that spurned, betrayed, bereft, thy father hath in his despair one fearful refuge left. He little deems that in this hand I clutch what still can save thy gentle youth from taunts and blows, the portion of the slave. And yet from nameless evil that passeth taunt and blow, foul outrage which thou knowest not, which thou shalt never know, then clap me round the neck once more, and give me one more kiss. And now, mine own dear little girl, there's no way but this." With that he lifted high the steel, and smote her in the side, and in her blood she sank to earth, and with one sob she died. Then for a little moment all people held their breath, and through the crowded forum was stillness as of death. And in another moment brake forth from one and all a cry as if the Volscians were coming o'er the wall. Some with averted faces shrieking fled home amain. Some ran to call a leech, and some ran to lift the slain. Some felt her lips and little wrist, if life might there be found. Some tore up their garments fast, and strove to staunch the wound. In vain they ran, and felt, and staunched, for never truer blow that good right arm had dealt in fight against a Volscian foe. When Appius Claudius saw that deed, he shuddered and sank down, and hid his face some little space with the corner of his gown, till with white lips and bloodshot eyes Virginius tottered nigh, and stood before the judgment seat, and held the knife on high. O dwellers in the nether gloom, avengers of the slain, by this dear blood I cry to you, do right between us twain. And even as Appius Claudius hath dealt by me and mine, deal you by Appius Claudius and all the Claudian line. So spake the slayer of his child, and turned and went his way. But first he cast one haggard glance to where the body lay, and writhed and groaned fearful groan, and then with steadfast feet strode right across the marketplace unto the sacred street. Then up sprang Appius Claudius, "Stop him alive or dead! 10,000 pounds of copper to the man who brings his head!" He looked upon his clients, but none would work his will. He looked upon his lictors, but they trembled and stood still. And as Virginius through the press his way in silence cleft, ever the mighty multitude fell back to right and left. And he hath passed in safety unto his woeful home, and there ta'en horse to tell the camp what deeds are done in Rome. By this the flood of people was swoln from every side, and streets and porches round were filled with that o'erflowing tide. And close around the body gathered a little train of them that were the nearest and dearest to the slain. They brought a bier and hung it with many a cypress crown, and gently they uplifted her, and gently laid her down. The face of Appius Claudius wore the Claudian scowl and sneer, and in the Claudian note he cried, "What doth this rabble here? Have they no crafts to mind at home, that hitherward they stray? Ho, lictors, clear the market-place, and fetch the corpse away." The voice of grief and fury till then had not been loud, but a deep sullen murmur wandered among the crowd, like the moaning noise that goes before the whirlwind on the deep, or the growl of a fierce watchdog but half aroused from sleep. And when the lictors at that word, tall yeomen all and strong, each with his axe and sheafed twigs went down into the throng, those old men say, who saw that day of sorrow and of sin, that in the Roman Forum was never such a din. The wailing, hooting, cursing, the howls of grief and hate were heard beyond the Pincian hill, beyond the Latin gate. But close around the body, where stood the little train of them that were the nearest and dearest to the slain, no cries were there, but teeth set fast, low whispers and black frowns, and breaking up of benches and girding up of gowns. 'Twas well the lictors might not pierce to where the maiden lay, else surely had they been all 12 torn limb from limb that day. Right glad they were to struggle back, blood streaming from their heads, with axes all in splinters and raiment all in shreds. Then Appius Claudius gnawed his lip, and the blood left his cheek, and thrice he beckoned with his hand, and thrice he strove to speak, and thrice the tossing forum set up a frightful yell. "See, see, thou dog, what thou hast done, and hide thy shame in hell! Thou that wouldst make our maidens slave must first make slaves of men. Tribunes, hurrah for tribunes! Down with the wicked 10!" And straightway, thick as hailstones, came whizzing through the air pebbles and bricks and potsherds all round the curule chair. And upon Appius Claudius great fear and trembling came, for never was a Claudius yet brave against aught but shame. Though the great houses love us not, we own, to do them right, that the great houses all save one have borne them well in fight. Still Caius of Corioli, his triumphs and his wrongs, his vengeance and his mercy live in our campfire songs. Beneath the yoke of Furius oft have Gaul and Tuscan bowed, and Rome may bear the pride of him of whom herself is proud. But evermore a Claudius shrinks from a stricken field, and changes colour like a maid at sight of sword and shield. The Claudian triumphs all were won within the city towers. The Claudian yoke was never pressed on any neck but ours. A Cossus, like a wild cat, springs ever at the face. A Fabius rushes like a boar against the shouting chase. But the vile Claudian litter, raging with currish spite, still yelps and snaps at those who run, still runs from those who smite. So now 'twas seen of Appius. When stones began to fly, he shook and crouched, and wrung his hands, and smote upon his thigh. "Kind clients, honest lictors, stand by me in this fray. Must I be torn to pieces? Home, home the nearest way." While yet he spake and looked around with a bewildered stare, 4 sturdy lictors put their necks beneath a cruel chair. and 80 clients on the left and 80 on the right arrayed themselves with swords and staves and loins girt up to fight. But though without a staff or sword, so furious was the throng that scarce the train with might and main could bring their lord along. 12 times the crowd made at him, 5 times they seized his gown. Small chance was his to rise again if once they got him down. And sharper came the pelting, and evermore the yell, "Tribunes! We will have tribunes!" rose with a louder swell. And the chair tossed as tosses a bark with tattered sail, when raves the Adriatic beneath an eastern gale, when Calabrian sea marks are lost in clouds of spume, and the great thunder cape has donned his veil of inky gloom. One stone hit Appius in the mouth, and one beneath the ear, and ere he reached Mount Palatine he swooned with pain and fear. His cursed head, that he was wont to hold so high with pride, now like a drunken man's hung down and swayed from side to side. And when his stout retainers had brought him to the door, his face and neck were all one cake of filth and clotted gore. As Appius Claudius was that day, so may his grandson be. God send Rome one such other sight, and send me there to see.